101.1 The Answer. Doc Washburn show continues. We can sound off and talk back at 501 401 1011. Right off the bat, I want to share with you what White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said a little bit earlier today about how things are going with Iran, because a lot of us, and when I say a lot of us, I'm including hardcore conservatives like you and me. No, I know. There's some liberals that listen, and I get it. But I'm also including the liberal mainstream media, people just trying to figure out what is the president talking about when he says we are in negotiations with somebody in Iran. And then yesterday, he smiled broadly and said they sent us a gift, and it was very nice. And no, I'm not going to tell you who we're talking to or what the gift was. And so, whether you are a huge supporter of what the president is doing in Iran, or your typical mainstream media liberal reporter who is just trying to score points and is against anything conservatives or Republicans are involved in, either way, across the political spectrum, everybody's like, okay, wait, what? What exactly are you? He's like, well, I can't tell you we're talking. I don't want him to get killed. Yeah, but I mean, they sent you a gift. Oh, yeah. Yeah, sure did. And again, regardless of whether you're a Trump supporter or your liberal mainstream media reporter who's just trying to nail him on whatever is available, or you're somewhere in between, everybody's going like, can you give us a hint? Don't leave me hanging. I mean, what? Anyway, so White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, one of the best I've ever seen, addressed it to the extent that the president wanted it addressed earlier today, and here's cut one.
From the outset, President Trump and the Department of War estimated it would take approximately 4 to 6 weeks to achieve this critical mission. 25 days in, the greatest military the world has ever known is ahead of schedule and performing exceptionally. Day by day, the Iranian regime is being crippled, and their ability to threaten the United States and our allies is being significantly weakened. Their ambitions of building a nuclear weapon have also been crushed to an even greater degree than they were in Operation Midnight Hammer in June 2025. That's why you're beginning to see the regime look for an exit ramp. They recognize they are being crushed, their ability to attack American and ally forces, as well as their ability to defend their own territory is dwindling literally hour by hour. Following President Trump's powerful threat on Saturday evening, it was made clear to the United States that Iran wanted to talk. President Trump is willing to listen.
Okay. So when he gave his 48-hour deadline that, hey, if you don't open the Strait of Hormuz within 48 hours, we're going to take out all of your power plants, starting with the biggest one. Somebody, and we don't know who, but somebody in what is left of the regime figures in Iran was like, okay, wait, hang on, wait a minute. But what we do know, or what we have been told, is that we're not negotiating with Iran directly, but Pakistan is being used as an intermediary. Now, on our only other cut today of audio, because what Caroline Lev was talking about earlier today really stands out as being more important than just about any other audio we could find today. She's going to talk about the challenges of making a deal with Iran because of their track record. Over many years, they consistently lie and cheat. Consistently. So I don't think she wants anybody to get irrationally exuberant at the idea that, oh, yeah, this is a cinch. Probably not. But again, what President Trump can point to when the history books are written is, look, we've bent over backwards trying to negotiate with these guys. I would have preferred a peaceful resolution to our issues, and they just wouldn't have it. So anyway, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, cut 2, please.
As President Trump announced on Monday, the United States has been engaged over the last 3 days in productive conversations, which led the president to temporarily instruct the Department of War to postpone planned strikes against Iranian power plants and energy infrastructure only. The remaining elements of the Iranian regime have another opportunity to cooperate with President Trump, permanently abandon their nuclear ambitions, and cease actively threatening America and our allies. But the president's preference is always peace. There does not need to be any more death and destruction. But if Iran fails to accept the reality of the current moment, if they fail to understand that they have been defeated militarily and will continue to be, President Trump will ensure they are hit harder than they have ever been hit before. President Trump does not bluff, and he is prepared to unleash hell. Iran should not miscalculate again. Their last miscalculation cost them their senior leadership, their Navy, their Air Force, and their air defense system. Any violence beyond this point will be because the Iranian regime refused to understand they have already been defeated and refused to come to a deal.
There you go. So I think it was just yesterday that somebody in Iran with army fatigues on got in front of a microphone and said, President Trump, you're fired. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So here's the deal. And hey, if I'm off base, I'm off base. And you can certainly call me on it if, as the facts unfold, you can say, well, Doc, it doesn't look like you knew what you're talking about. But here's what I think. And I'm picking up on what this guy in Iran was stupid enough to do. And I'm picking up on what White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt just said. She said, if they are unwilling to admit, to recognize that they have been completely defeated, if they somehow think that they can continue this, they can carry on, President Trump's made it clear, we're going to hit them much harder than we've already hit them. I mean, think about it. Because President Trump was saying yesterday, we control the skies over Iran. Taking out their Air Force, taking off their anti-aircraft capabilities. They don't have a Navy left. So what are they going to do if we take out all their power plants and the whole country of 92 million people is descended into darkness? See, right now, just work with me on this. Right now, whoever's left in the regime was like, well, thank Allah that I was not in the meeting with the Ayatollah on day one. I'm still here. Allah is still Akbar, and we're just going to still keep on slaughtering our own people who have any problems with us. And who's going to stop me? Because we got guns and they don't. Okay, Now, again, Trump gave him 48 hours at 6:44 p.m. on Saturday. And then by Monday morning, he was like, you know what? We are actually negotiating through Pakistan with some folks. Can't tell you who. They gave us a gift. Big smile. And I've told Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, let's put this off for another 4 days. Okay, that'd be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So I think the guys in charge of Iran are so hard-headed and so low IQ. How would I think it's going to be any different than their first negotiation with Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, in which they proudly proclaimed, we've got enough enriched uranium to make 11 nukes. And that's off the table. No. That's non-negotiable. And Witkoff is like, I don't think you understand what's going on here. And they don't, because I've said it before and I'll say it again because I believe it bears repeating. First of all the way back with Muhammad and the Quran, they encouraged first cousins intermarrying. So and that leads to a lot of birth defects and a high rate of infant mortality. But the people who do survive and grow up have lower IQs. This has been going on for 13 centuries. So you couple that with the fact that they are taught maniacal, religion-oriented hatred of people not like them from the cradle, but they're not taught logic. They're not taught linear reasoning. They aren't really. They don't really have a good grip on the idea of objective reality, for that matter. Logic, linear reasoning, objective reality. So when you say, do you realize how ridiculous that sounds? Do you realize that doesn't make any sense? They can honestly answer, no, what are you talking about? What is this? Looks ridiculous. What does that mean? What is this? Doesn't make sense. What does that mean? So if they don't understand any of that, good luck trying to explain cause and effect to them, because you may as well be speaking ancient Greek to a modern day Filipino. They're not going to, there's no way. So anyway, I expect that by Friday evening, we'll be just bombing the smithereens out of their power plants. And I know people tend to get impatient. Like, why don't we just go ahead and, plate glass the thing and just be done with? But, it is what it is. You want to talk about it, of course. Number to call is 501-401-1011. The Doc Washburn Show continues on Little Rock's premier talk station, 101.1, The Answer. Well, it looks like the computer crashed, so it would be better, I think, that I go live than that we, do the what's that old? There was an old radio term. Rush Limbaugh used to talk about it every once in a while. Oh yeah, dead air. Yeah. So I guess it'd be better, for me to be talking on the what do you call this again? Oh yeah, the air. Yeah, the air. I don't mind. No, I've told the boss before. I said, you know what? You could bring in 25 fifth graders on career day, bring them into the studio, and I'll keep doing I'll keep doing the talk show. All right, so there's an account I follow over on X. I finally learned how to say X instead of Twitter. Radio Genoa, and it's got 1.5 million followers, and they've got a video. Looks like probably either from Nigeria or Sudan. Pretty clearly jihadists, and there's a lot of smoke rising in the background. And Radio Genoa says, in many African countries, Muslims burn Christian villages and then kill the inhabitants just because they're Christians. It will also happen in Europe and America because where Islam arrives, there is no peace. History makes this clear. So I've said it before, and I'll say it again. If they hit us again, if they do another 9/11, maybe even bigger this time, Republican voters and maybe even some Democrats who will see the light and some independents, some libertarians who will see the light, they're not going to be thinking, oh, okay, let's see. Do we want J.D. Vance or do we want Marco Rubio to be our standard bearer running for president in 2028? No, they're going to want somebody like former Auburn football coach, U.S. Senator Tommy Tuberville out of Alabama, or Representative Tim Burchett out of Tennessee, or Representative Randy Fine out of Florida, Brandon Gill out of Texas, or Andy Ogles out of Tennessee, who are basically just saying, look, Islam is not compatible with Western civilization, which includes the USA. So that's, and God forbid, I hope it doesn't happen, but there were 4 violent jihad attacks in the USA in the first half of March. We got Easter coming up. If you attend church, I hope someone has thought through what to do if there's an active shooter. And if you haven't, I would strongly recommend you contact my friend Ed Monk over at Last Resort Firearms Training. Because unlike the FBI, Ed Monk will tell you the truth. I, a couple of years ago, went to a seminar on what to do about an active shooter conducted by a local FBI agent who lied. And the FBI wants you to run away and try to hide, and last resort, look around and fight with whatever office equipment you have or whatever. And when I asked, well, why not just shoot the active shooter? Oh, whoa. I mean, we don't recommend that now. That hardly ever works statistically. They lie about the statistics. They just lie. What if when the cops get there, they can't figure out who the good guy is and who the bad guy is, and they wind up shooting the guy that shot the shooter? Well, I'll take that chance. As soon as we neutralize the shooter before the cop gets there, I'll put my gun away. But it really concerned me that this FBI seminar was done at a church, and at the end of the 90 minutes, I was the only one who had any questions. Everybody else, including, I'm sure, a lot of people with higher IQs than I, just kind of automatically trusted this authority figure from the government who was lying to us. She actually said the guy that killed over 50 people at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, Florida, was not ideologically motivated. I had a chance to ask my question. I said, he called 911 from inside the men's room and proclaimed allegiance to ISIS. So he was ideologically motivated. She said, oh, I didn't say he wasn't ideologically motivated. I just said he didn't attack the nightclub because it was a gay club. That wasn't the reason he attacked it. I had people coming up to me after the thing was over saying she lied. She did say that. You called her on it, and she lied. And that was an FBI agent introduced by another FBI agent at an active shooter seminar at a church. So excuse me if I don't believe everybody. Take everybody for the word. More coming up. 101.1 The Answer. Doc Washburn Show continues. You can sound off and talk back. 501-401-1011. The Doc Washburn Show, the only show that tells you a lot of things that are in the news nobody else wants to talk about. Senator Ron Johnson, Republican, Wisconsin, is the reason that I ever heard of ivermectin. Senator Ron Johnson, the day before, or at the most a couple of days before, I was going to fill in for nationally syndicated radio talk show host Mark Levin in late 2020, had a doctor, Pierre Corey, also from Wisconsin, under oath, talking about how ivermectin worked against COVID. So maybe you didn't need the vaccine. And so I got that audio off of YouTube and shared it with Mark Levin's audience of almost 400 radio stations. So I've always had a warm spot in my heart for Senator Johnson. Today, Senator Ron Johnson is out there on X saying, I just released nearly 2,000 pages of official HHS government records showing the Biden administration's failure to immediately warn the public about a serious safety concern linked to the Pfizer COVID-19 booster that they discovered as early as November 2022. He says, below is a clip from a January 2023 HHS communications plan with edits from Biden officials downplaying the significance of the ischemic stroke safety signal. Now, I had to look up ischemic, I-S-C-H-E-M-I-C. Ischemia is a serious condition characterized by reduced blood flow and oxygen supply to tissues or organs commonly caused by blocked arteries like atherosclerosis, blood clots, or even vessel spasms. Key symptoms include chest pain, angina, shortness of breath, limb pain, and sudden neurological deficits. Treatment involves restoring blood flow, while untreated ischemia can cause damage or infarction. You're not going to make me look up another word, are you? Infarction. But, symptoms of ischemia: chest pain and pressure, nausea, sweating, and dizziness. Stroke symptoms, including sudden numbness, weakness, confusion, and trouble speaking. Coldness, numbness, pain in legs or arms, particularly during movement. Risk factors. Major risk factors include high blood pressure, high cholesterol, smoking, diabetes, and obesity. Somehow, Google AI leaves out the COVID vaccine as being a risk factor. So Ron Johnson has a screenshot here from HHS. It said, currently, the signal is moderately elevated, but stable/persistent. The rate ratios seen so far are significantly lower than statistical signals seen for issues like myocarditis. The Biden administration changed it from moderately to slightly in more than one instance. Senator Ron Johnson goes on. He says, I sent HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. a letter with preliminary findings based on HHS government records showing that the Biden administration was aware of a statistically significant safety signal for ischemic stroke in individuals 65 years and older following receipt of the Pfizer bivalent booster. Now, a lot of us have forgotten what they did to us. Going way back before there was even a booster or a vaccine available. Going back to when people like Governor Asa Hutchinson shut down the state and small business owners were going bankrupt and some of them committing suicide. But see, that was an inconvenient truth that the news media didn't want to cover. Because everybody pretended that the emperor was wearing clothes. And so when Governor Asa Hutchinson said, well, first of all, our small restaurants are going to have to close down completely, and they'll only be able to make to-go orders at curbside. Everybody's like, oh, okay, all right, well, I guess it's that important. I say everybody, not everybody. My friend Scott Gray put together a nonprofit called Reopen Arkansas that actually sued Governor Hutchinson and his COVID board, and I think they did so successfully. But in the meantime, when Governor Hutchinson was allowing the small restaurants and cafes to open on a limited basis, he said, well, of course, we'll still have a mask mandate. And here's how that will work. You walk into the restaurant or cafe with your mask on, and when you're seated at your table, once you make your drink order, then you can take your mask off. And everybody's like, oh, okay. Thanks, Asa, for keeping us safe. And nobody, or hardly anybody, was asking, why do I have to have my mask on until I make my drink order and I can take it off after my drink order? So, aren't you glad all that is in the rear view mirror? Huh? Aren't you glad we don't have to deal with any of that anymore? Yeah. That's ancient history now, right? I mean, thank God that we are way past that, right? But we aren't. I'm sitting here looking at the official website for the Arkansas Department of Health that to this day, March 25th, 2026, tells pregnant mothers, get the COVID vaccine. Now, for those of you listening down in Dumas, pregnant mothers have babies in utero. And the Arkansas Department of Health website also says that you need to start vaccinating your children starting at 6 months with a COVID vaccine. But the same people who didn't ask, why does Governor Hutchinson make us wear a mask until we give our drink order and then can take it off, are not asking the health department, why is it okay for the baby in the mama's womb to get the vaccine, but it's not okay for the baby to get the vaccine once he or she is delivered until he or she is 6 months old? So I'll never forget, a year or so before Sarah Huckabee Sanders announced she's going to run for governor, somehow or another, because she didn't want to talk about much, a TV reporter from Northwest Arkansas asked her what she thought about how Asa was handling COVID vaccine, not COVID vaccine, but the whole COVID situation, and she thought he's doing a good job. So when people were clamoring for somebody to challenge her in that primary for governor 4 years ago, I kind of had that in the back of my head. And I'm like, oh boy. And she thought Asa was doing a good job handling COVID. Yikes. But, you know, she says nice things about Bill Clinton, too. So I'm sure everything's going to be fine. And you wonder why all of a sudden she has so much anxiety thinking that maybe an outsider like Brian Norris, who agrees with President Trump, we need to get rid of the voting machines, might be elected Secretary of State in the Republican primary runoff. You wonder why all of a sudden, after the primary in which nobody got over 50%, she finally endorses Kim Hammer, who would rather see people in jail who want to get rid of the voting machines. He's been running since January of last year. If he was the obvious choice, why didn't she endorse him last year? But she got everybody else endorsing him. Just about everybody in the legislature, Tom Cotton, all these folks. And everybody ignoring the fact that they're all fighting against President Trump, who says we got to get rid of the voting machines. I wonder about things like that. I hope you do too. My wife and I are planning on voting for Brian Norris. We live in Pulaski County, and there's only one race in the runoff, and that's Secretary of State. There's only one race in the runoff in Faulkner County, probably Lonoke County too. And Saline County, there are two races because they have to have a runoff for the Republican nomination for sheriff. And I've been very impressed with Richard Friend. He said publicly on my show, look, as far as I'm concerned, y'all elect me sheriff, we're going to digitize everything in the Boys on the Tracks file and put it all online and only redact what the law forces us to redact. I'm like, buddy. Because, I mean, this goes back to August of 1987. So for almost 40 years, people in Arkansas have been under the impression that the guilty have gone free. And some of the people that they think were responsible for those murders are still above ground, walking around, breathing the same air that we are. So that'd be interesting. So if I lived in Saline County, you better believe I'd be voting for Richard Friend for sheriff. Maybe finally somebody breaks the hold of the good old boy system in Saline County. Danny Harmon's gone. He died a couple of years ago. Richard Garrett, his number 2 guy, died a few years before that. But the guys who a lot of people believe followed Danny Harmon's orders to murder Kevin Ives and Don Henry, they're still walking around. So, and people who knew what happened, some of them still walking around. And I'll just tell you what I told my listeners over the other station when I was still new here. I'd only been here a few months. It's like late 2014, early 2015. I can't pretend I don't know where I am. And I can't pretend I don't know that a lot of people died very mysterious deaths or just disappeared altogether in the late 80s, early 90s in the state of Arkansas because they knew too much about the untimely demise of Kevin Ives and Don Henry. And we might never see justice for this on this earth. But whenever one of these people responsible for it checks out, buddy, They get justice from the Lord. See, the Bible says that each one of us is going to have to stand before God and give an account for what we've done on this earth. And I asked my preacher about that one time when I was still in Panama City, Florida, because I know that's what the Bible says. And I also know that the Bible says everybody's a sinner. We've all sinned, fall short of the glory of God. If anybody says he has no sin, he's a liar. But if we confess our sin to the Lord, he's faithful and just to forgive us. So I asked my preacher, both these things are in the Bible. We confess our sins to the Lord, and we accept his salvation. He's faithful and just to forgive us. On the other hand, everybody's going to have to give an account for what he's done when we pass away from this earth. I'm just trying to figure out how to kind of put those two things together in my mind. And God bless him, my preacher said, well, maybe I can help. I don't remember verbatim, but this is the gist of it. He said, would you rather stand before God on Judgment Day and him be your judge and condemn you for what you're guilty of? Or would you rather stand before God and see him as your father who has forgiven you? I'm like, oh, okay. Well, that makes sense. Thank you. I'm going to go get some lunch because I asked him after church. Anyway, I hadn't planned on preaching today, but sometimes it just goes that way. Doc Washburn Show continues. Little Rock's premier talk station, 101.1 The Answer. 101.1 The Answer. Doc Washburn Show continues, where you can sound off and talk back at 501-401-1011. Well, let's take a look at it. Republicans on the Senate Judiciary Committee out there on X today saying Jack Smith's team put together a wish list for members of Congress they wanted to target. Smith's team already knew these members had communicated with President Trump's inner circle. They subpoenaed the members' private records anyway. And boy, they got a lot of names on their wish list. So Jeff Clark, a good Christian fellow who was Deputy Attorney General under President Trump's first term and actually was over 2 different divisions of DOJ. He said this kind of Stalinist relationship mapping is what Denver Riggleman did for the January 6th committee as well. If they could have gotten away with it, Jack Smith would have put all connected conservative Republicans in jail. Yet the media covered for Jack Smith with his cover story that he was just an independent doing his job. Now, in case you're a young person and you hear the words Stalinist relationship mapping, and or even if you're a senior citizen like me and you hear the words Stalinist relationship mapping and you're wondering, I wonder what that means. I know Stalin was a bad guy. I know he was in charge of the Soviet Union from the time Lenin passed away in the 20s till 1953 when Stalin passed away. But what is, Doc, what is Stalinist relationship mapping? Well, I'll tell you. So one of Stalin's top guys was a guy named Beria. And he had a classic saying, this Beria guy. He was in charge of the Lavrenti Beria was in charge of the secret police of the Soviet Union. And so he had a classic saying, show me the man and I'll show you the crime. In other words, we've decided we're going to put this guy in prison or worse. We just need a reason. Cool. Not a problem. I can come up with something. Show me the man and I'll show you the crime. So Jack Smith is a guy who's taken on the mantle of Lavrenti Beria. Show me the man, I'll show you the crime. Okay, now, there is a Muslim social media influencer out of Turkey, and he posted a picture of a bunch of skeletons on the earth somewhere. He says, sensitive, a mass grave containing 300 people has been uncovered in Gaza. It was reported small children were killed with their hands tied behind their backs. So, readers added context, community notes for the win. This is the mass grave from Mongolia and dates back all the way to the Han dynasty around 2,100 years ago. So my buddy Bonchi at Red State says, if even half of what they claim about Gaza was actually true, will they have to constantly lie like this? Well, no, they wouldn't. No, they wouldn't. But they don't care how bad it makes them look. I'm here to tell you, they couldn't care less. They're just taking one for the team, taking one for Allah. They refuse to admit that he's not all that Akbar after all. The Doc Washburn Show continues after the top of the hour news on Little Rock's home for Talk Radio. 101.1, The Answer. 101.1, The Answer, the Doc Washburn Show continues, where you can sound off and talk back. 501-401-1011. I was just listening to what the voice guy said at the start of the hour. The show that gives you the stories that nobody else does. I go again to Sundance over at the Last Refuge, the conservativetreehouse.com. Big news. House Intel Committee releases hidden transcript of Inspector General Michael Atkinson. For the past several years, he says, I've been advocating for sunlight as the best disinfectant. I know, brother, I have too. Since September 2025, I've been working through a painfully slow and convoluted process to share research, assist truth tellers, and guide those who have the authority to deliver the sunlight. Today, I can happily report on progress. In 2019, an impeachment effort against President Trump was triggered when a member of the National Security Council named Alexander Vindman coordinated with a member of the National Intelligence Council named Eric Ciaramella to fabricate a false claim that President Trump leveraged his power and authority to demand Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky release information on Joe and Hunter Biden's corrupt financial dealings in Ukraine. At the time of the 2019 impeachment construct, Eric Ciaramella was working for the CIA as an analyst within the National Intelligence Council 2 years prior to the 2019 impeachment construct. In January 2017, the same CIA analyst, Eric Ciaramella, had worked on the Fraudulent Intelligence Community Assessment, the ICA, at the behest of CIA Director John Brennan. Now, I got to digress from the article here for just a moment. We have to have a little insertion into my retelling of the article, just so everybody knows we're all on the same page here. Let's see. Yes, 6 words. And nothing's ever going to happen. Okay. Not just trying to raise any false hope. I'd love to be wrong about this more so than just about anything in my life. I realize there's a federal grand jury meeting to talk about Russiagate, and they've been meeting since middle of January in Fort Pierce, Florida. But, I mean, anyway, back to Sundance at theconservativetreehouse.com and his article entitled Big News House Intel Committee Releases Hidden Transcript of Inspector General Michael Atkinson. And again, is anybody else talking about this? I kind of don't think so. He said, sidebar, in 2025, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, working with CIA Director John Ratcliffe, removed the National Intelligence Council from inside the CIA to provide greater overall transparency within the intelligence community. The NIC was moved into the purview of the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. Okay, great. Now, key point. Eric Ciaramella was one of the key analysts who constructed the fraudulent Russian interference ICA in 2017, and later, the fraudulent impeachment effort in 2019. Eric Ciaramella became the anonymous CIA whistleblower in the 2019 impeachment effort. Before 2019, CIA analysts weren't allowed to anonymously make claims against political officials. Because of the sensitive information they handled, any allegation of wrongdoing based on intelligence had to be made with their name attached. How about that? But Intelligence Community Inspector General Michael Atkinson changed or modified the rules permitting Chiaramella to remain anonymous and make a claim that ultimately led to the effort to impeach President Trump. Eric Chiaramella allegedly fabricated intelligence information, shared it with Congress and the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, otherwise known as HPSCI, and then remained anonymous. HPSCI chairman Adam Schiff was said to have assisted him. On October 4th, 2019, because again, in 2019, the Democrats were in charge of the House. So they had their people being chair of all the different committees. On October 4th, 2019, as part of the House impeachment inquiry, Intelligence Community Inspector General Michael Atkinson gave closed-door testimony to the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence as part of their impeachment investigation. One of the key questions to the Inspector General of the Intel Community, Michael Atkinson, surrounded the authority of his office changing the CIA whistleblower rules that permitted Eric Chiaramella to remain anonymous. During later questioning by then Congressman John Ratcliffe, as part of the House impeachment effort, it came to light that Inspector General Michael Atkinson testified CIA analyst Eric Chiaramella, the anonymous so-called whistleblower, had lied about key details when questioned by Inspector General Atkinson. Well, how about them apples? Because the anonymous whistleblower complaint by Chiaramella was the cornerstone of the impeachment effort to get President Trump in 2019, Chairman Adam Schiff sealed the transcript of Inspector General Atkinson's testimony, classifying it under the guise of national security interests and burying it in the HPSCI control system. It's worth reemphasizing that Eric Chiaramella was both the analyst behind the disputed 2017 Intelligence Community Assessment for Director John Brennan, and later in 2019 involved in the contested impeachment effort. Both operations involved impeding and targeting President Trump. If Congress, or more importantly, the American public, had known CIA analyst Eric Chiaramella was both the key author of the fraudulent 2016 Intelligence Community Assessment and the later 2019 CIA complaint, it's doubtful any impeachment effort would have moved forward. Inside the intelligence community oversight system, the Chiaramella connection to both intelligence community operations could have been made. His anonymity as a whistleblower served a purpose. DNI Tulsi Gabbard's 2025 decision to remove the National Intelligence Council from behind the curtain of the CIA is additionally supported with his hindsight. The transcript of Inspector General Michael Atkinson's testimony became a key document to release because at its core, we know that Atkinson testified that Eric Chiaramella lied. The Chiaramella lie is at the heart of the impeachment attempt, the attempt to get Donald Trump in 2019. Don't get lost in the details of the politics of this. When you peel back all the layers of D.C. at its epicenter, this was an operation to impeach a sitting president that came from within the CIA, and it almost succeeded. When a top administration intelligence official, holding what I believe to be the best possibility of making a difference, reached out, I began the assist by citing specific documents that will reveal a much bigger story. The Atkinson transcript was one of those documents. I've outlined how the silo system is constructed to intentionally impede or stop review. Adam Schiff isn't stupid. He knew what he was doing and how to use the separation of powers for his purposes. The executive branch would not easily be able to reach into the legislative branch and extract information. That's why then HPSCI chairman, impeachment chairman, and now Senator Adam Schiff buried the Atkinson transcript in the vault of the House Intelligence Committee. The process. First, you need a Republican president in the White House. Check. Second, you need an aligned intelligence community, DNI. Check. And third, you need a Republican-controlled HPSCI. Check. Now, to extract the transcript, the executive would first need to understand its value. Then the executive would need to know where it was. Then the executive would need a qualified stakeholder with appropriate clearances to request a review of the transcript in the HIPSCI Secure Compartmented Intelligence Facility, the SCIF. If the HIPSCI approved, the executive would be given an appointment date to read it. No notes, no copying, just reading. Then after reading, the executive stakeholder would then need to request the HIPSCI chair and ranking member for a classified copy. The chair and ranking member would need to agree on the value of the sunlight on the legislative branch controlled information to get a copy. The entire House Intelligence Committee would need to vote on the release to the executive. The vote would need to be scheduled on the committee calendar. A HIPSCI vote would then take place. Good grief. This is crazy, man. So at that point, he links to the source, which is an official release yesterday afternoon from Republicans, the House Intel Committee. Here's what they say. Today, the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence held a business meeting to consider multiple committee actions. During the business meeting, the committee voted in favor of releasing 2 transcripts from 2019 hearings with former Intelligence Community Inspector General Michael Atkinson. The hearings were held to examine Atkinson's role in an alleged whistleblower complaint, which ultimately led to Democrats' first impeachment efforts against President Trump in December 2019. 1 transcript would be released to the ODNI for classification review and then subsequently released to the public by the committee with a second unclassified transcript. Chairman Rick Crawford finally, see, he doesn't get enough credit. Rick Crawford, maybe you heard the name. U.S. Representative from Arkansas, representing the 1st District, all of East Arkansas. Chairman Rick Crawford said, and I quote, "The great deal of widespread speculation about the Atkinson classified hearing transcript is indicative of the American people's complete and warranted mistrust of the intelligence community. In far too many instances, the intelligence community hides behind the veil of overclassification. Sometimes sunlight is the best disinfectant. As part of the committee's continued effort to balance the transparency the American people deserve and the need to protect sensitive national security information, we hope that the release of these transcripts allows the American people to make their own determinations. As chairman, I remain committed to ensuring this committee, where possible, is transparent as the intelligence community works to rebuild trust with the American people." I'll say it again. Rick Crawford doesn't get the respect or credit that he deserves for trying to protect this country as chair of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. And I've got more about that coming up as the Doc Washburn Show continues on Little Rock's premier talk station, 101.1 The Answer. I just need to say something. There it is. 101.1 The Answer. Doc Washburn Show continues. We sound off and talk back. 501-401-1011. I just need to say something. Last summer, CIA director, and, he was the DNI back when Trump was in his first term. CIA Director John Ratcliffe last summer released a lessons learned official CIA report about Russiagate in the early days. And almost immediately, the chair of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, Rick Crawford, U.S. Representative of Arkansas, wrote an open letter to President Trump saying this is a whitewash. Now again, Ratcliffe was a conservative Republican U.S. representative from Texas for years and years and years. And Crawford's out here calling him out for relying on holdovers from Biden-Obama years of CIA, saying this is a whitewash. And, oh, by the way, President Trump, we've got a report from the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence from 2017 when Devin Nunes was the chairman, just exposing a lot of this Russiagate stuff they tried to do to you. And it's been under lock and key for 8 years now. CIA has it. They won't let us release it, including your current CIA director, John Ratcliffe, whom I have been in contact with, and he refuses. Would you please order him to release this report? And within a week or two, Caroline Leavitt, White House press secretary, introducing DNI Tulsi Gabbard to talk about this report that had just been released. And they both gave a shout out. They gave credit to U.S. Representative Rick Crawford from Arkansas, chair of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, for being the driving factor behind finally getting this 8-year-old report about how the intelligence community tried to take down the sitting president, Donald J. Trump. And hardly anybody in Arkansas knows about this because Rick Crawford, unlike just about everybody I can think of in Congress, doesn't appear to be doing this for his own glory, his own PR, his own gratification. There's been a total news blackout on this in Arkansas media, except for the Doc Washburn Show. Why? Well, not because the Arkansas Democrat Gazette and the TV stations are intentionally ignoring it, just because Rick Crawford didn't even do a press release about it. There's nothing on his website. I found out about it from justthenews.com, John Solomon. And I'm like, wow, that's impressive. That took some guts for him to call out President Trump's CIA director, conservative Republican John Ratcliffe, say this is whitewash. Oh, and by the way, President Trump, would you please order your CIA director to release this report from 8 years ago? So I'm gratified that finally somebody, and 99% of Americans have never read the conservativetreehouse.com, but for the people who do read it, finally Rick Crawford gets a little bit of attaboy, a little bit of a pat on the back. So the transcripts will be posted on the committee website once they undergo the standard classification review with the Office of the DNI, Tulsi Gabbard. And the HIPSCI committee has voted to release the transcript. And DNI Tulsi Gabbard will now walk the unhidden transcript through the declassification process. Fastest way is through President Trump's office. Hopefully the redactions will be minimal, then we all get to see it. This has been a long, frustrating, and complicated process, but Sundance, the conservativetreehouse.com says, but we have succeeded. And the final point, you can tell this is a long, arduous process. However, once the process begins, you'll notice that certain tripwires are crossed and people in and around D.C. find out what you're doing. Yes, D.C. interests realized months ago that Tulsi Gabbard was on the trail of this transcript. Now, do the recent attacks against DNI Tulsi Gabbard gain context? Well, yeah, I get it. But I do have a concern that Joe Kent, until a few days ago, the head of the National Counterterrorism Center, worked for Tulsi and answered directly to her. And maybe I just don't know how this works, but maybe she was not responsible for vetting him before he became part of the administration. Or maybe Trump wanted him and maybe she warned him about Trump about Joe Kent and he didn't. Who knows, man? I hope somebody will ask her about it under oath in a committee setting. But other than that, yeah, I think she's doing a good job. And I'm not surprised that there are people who don't want the sunlight to be the best disinfectant, if you catch my drift. And I think you might. More coming up, but we'll hear what Caroline Levitt said earlier today after the bottom of the hour news break on the Doc Washburn Show. 101.1, The Answer. I guess it's my turn. All right, 101.1, The Answer. Doc Washburn Show continues, where you can sound off and talk back at 501 401 1011. So earlier this afternoon, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt had some serious things to say about what's going on in Iran and about what could be their last chance to avoid the total destruction of their power plants. So we go to cut one, Caroline Leavitt, please.
From the outset, President Trump and the Department of War estimated it would take approximately 4 to 6 weeks to achieve this critical mission. 25 days in, the greatest military the world has ever known is ahead of schedule and performing exceptionally. Day by day, the Iranian regime is being crippled, and their ability to threaten the United States and our allies is being significantly weakened. Their ambitions of building a nuclear weapon have also been crushed to an even greater degree than they were in Operation Midnight Hammer in June 2025. That's why you're beginning to see the regime look for an exit ramp. They recognize they are being crushed. Their ability to attack American and ally forces, as well as their ability to defend their own territory, is dwindling literally hour by hour. Following President Trump's powerful threat on Saturday evening, it was made clear to the United States that Iran wanted to talk. President Trump is willing to listen.
All right, now, let me just give you some context for that. Saturday evening at 6:44 p.m. Central Time, President Trump, on his Truth social media platform, said that if Iran doesn't unblock the Strait of Hormuz in exactly 48 hours, we were going to bomb their power plants, starting with the biggest one. By Monday morning, he said, Iran reached out to us and we're having some productive negotiations, and they actually even sent us a little gift. He has this big smile on his face, not unlike the Cheshire Cat. And so people were asking, well, no, who exactly are you talking to? Well, I don't want to get them killed. Can't tell you that. Okay, what was the nature of this gift? It's nice. It was a nice gift. I can't really tell you. And so I think that regardless of whether you are a conservative Republican and a 100% supporter of the president, or you're on the opposite end of the spectrum and a typical mainstream liberal reporter, either way, you got to be pretty curious. Hey, what's going on? And we at least have the info that the negotiations are not direct right now, going through a third party, some Pakistani government or whatever. But I can't imagine that whoever he's talking to with Iran would even have the authority, much less the desire, to basically comply with all of President Trump's demands. Because again, the thing is, they have to be defeated. They have to be crushed. So basically, the only negotiation would be getting them to realize they're done. They are done. And I just can't imagine that they're going to want to say, yeah, okay, well, in that case, I guess we're done. Because just yesterday, in the middle of what's supposed to be these negotiations, you had some knucklehead in Iran in army fatigues doing a little video and saying, President Trump, you're fired. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So clearly, they're not getting the fact that they're done. And if you really truly believe that if you're a martyr for Allah, you get to go to paradise to the 72 virgins, okay. Oh, well. Anyway, we have cut to from one of the best White House press secretaries we've ever had, Caroline Leavitt.
As President Trump announced on Monday, the United States has been engaged over the last 3 days in productive conversations, which led the president to temporarily instruct the Department of War to postpone planned strikes against Iranian power plants and energy infrastructure only. The remaining elements of the Iranian regime have another opportunity to cooperate with President Trump, permanently abandon their nuclear ambitions, and cease actively threatening America and our allies. But the president's preference is always peace. There does not need to be any more death and destruction. But if Iran fails to accept the reality of the current moment, if they fail to understand that they have been defeated militarily and will continue to be, President Trump will ensure they are hit harder than they have ever been hit before. President Trump does not bluff, and he is prepared to unleash hell. Iran should not miscalculate again. Their last miscalculation cost them their senior leadership, their Navy, their Air Force, and their air defense system. Any violence beyond this point will be because the Iranian regime refused to understand they have already been defeated and refused to come to a deal.
Well, they do refuse to accept this. And this morning, bright and early this morning, the news is out from Iran State TV. Iran has rejected the U.S. 15-point plan. I'll tell you what that plan is here in a minute. But again, you got to understand something. And I explained this at the top of the show, but that's an hour and a half ago. And almost everybody listening now will be different folks that were listening an hour and a half ago. You got to understand something. Muhammad, over 13 centuries ago, recommended first cousin intermarriage. Now, this led to a lot of birth defects, a lot of infant mortality, but the people who survived and grew up would have lower IQs because that's just what happens when first cousins marry each other. This has been going on for 13 centuries. So you got a lot of low IQ people in strict Muslim countries. Now, I don't care if you're Sunni or you're Shiite, a lot of these people are taught a maniacal hatred of non-Muslims from birth, okay? They're not taught logic. They're not taught linear reasoning. They're not very familiar with the idea of objective reality. So when you try to talk to these people and you're like, do you realize how ridiculous what you just said sounds? They're like, no, what are you talking about? If you try to say, okay, how can you not realize that what you just said doesn't make sense? They're like, what makes sense? What does that mean? They don't know. So good luck trying to get them familiar with the idea of cause and effect. If you don't do this, then that's going to happen. To quote the great philosopher Chris Rock, I wouldn't do that blank if I were you. Remember that? How to keep you from getting beat up by the cops. You remember that little 4-minute comedy skit he did like, 12, 15 years ago? I wouldn't do that blank if I were you. So let's take a look. Let's take a look. Iran rejects the U.S. 15-point plan and says the war ends only on its terms, not President Trump's timeline. That's what a senior Iranian official, wait, there's one of them left? Told state-run Press TV. Tehran says it will keep striking until its demands are met. So, Iran's demands. And, buddy, let me just tell you something. They are in la land. Here's what Iran is demanding. Number one, a full stop to attacks and targeted killings. Number two, guarantees the war will not resume. Number three, compensation for war damage. We're supposed to pay them for taking out whatever. Number four, end of fighting across all fronts, including Hezbollah. So in other words, Israel's got to stop striking Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. Number five, international recognition of Iran's authority over the Strait of Hormuz. Iran says it has informed intermediaries that no ceasefire or talks will happen unless all conditions are accepted. Okay, that means by Friday night, we're going to start taking out their power plants. Idiots. Blooming idiots. No, I'm trying to show restraint. I know it'd be a lot easier to use cuss words and stuff, but I don't cuss, and it's not appropriate for be on the radio anyway. I mean, the FCC always kind of has some thoughts about that. Well, no, I mean the carve out. No, that's a good point. The carve out for hip hop music on some stations is they can only get away with it if the FCC is not aware of what they're doing. So most of them do little, not bleep so much as just silence where the cuss words are. Just so you know. All right. So the great Mark Dubowitz, the CEO of the FDD, the Foundation for the Defense of Democracy, who has been sanctioned by both Iran and Russia, he says, if these demands are accurate and Iran ever accepted them, big ifs, this would be much better than the Obama deal. Obviously, much depends on the details. But 14 of the 15 demands the Trump administration reportedly has conveyed to Iran. And again, this was yesterday evening. As of this morning, Iran's like, no, we're not going to do that. Anyway, here are the, I'll give you Trump's demands to Iran that they rejected. Coming up in a minute. We got to run to a break. Doc Washburn Show continues on Little Rock's premier talk station, 101.1 The Answer. 101.1 The Answer. Doc Washburn Show continues. Sound off and talk back 501-401-1011. So Mark Dubowitz over there, the CEO of Foundation for Defense of Democracies. 14 of the 15 demands the Trump administration reportedly has conveyed to Iran. Number one, Iran must dismantle existing nuclear capabilities. Number two, Iran must commit never to pursue nuclear weapons. Well, they've been committing to that all along as they pursue nuclear weapons. Number three, no uranium enrichment on Iranian territory. Number four, Iran must hand its stockpile of enriched uranium to the International Atomic Energy Agency. Number five, Natanz nuclear facility, Isfahan, and Fordow fuel enrichment plant nuclear facilities must be dismantled. Number six, the IAEA must be granted full access to Iran's nuclear facilities. Number seven, Iran must abandon its regional proxy paradigm. Now, in case you're like, regional proxy paradigm, what that means is, with the billions of dollars that Barack Hussein Obama gave to Iran, they've been funneling a lot of money to jihad terrorist organizations like Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad to murder non-Muslims. Yeah, you got to cut that out. Number eight, Iran must cease the funding, directing, and arming its proxies. Number nine, the Strait of Hormuz must remain open. Number 10, Iran's missile program must be limited in both range and quantity. Yeah, see, Iran kind of goofed up. Didn't they kind of goof up, young Tommy, back in the producer's seat? Iran kind of goofed up the other day because they launched a couple of missiles at Diego Garcia down there in the Indian Ocean, like 2,500 miles away from Tehran. And nobody knew they had missiles that could go that far until they did that. And now everybody's like, well, daggum. That means they could hit London, England if they wanted to. They could hit just about anything in Europe, daggum. They always said, no, we ain't got no long-range missiles. No, they said it more like this. No, you don't understand. We have no long-range missiles. No attempt to do such a thing. We live in peace and harmony with all of our neighbors. Well, daggum, once we started hitting them, they hit about 12 Muslim countries. All these Muslim countries sitting over there saying, hey, Iran, we're Muslim countries. What do we do to y'all? It doesn't matter. Oh, okay. Well, blank you and the horse rode in on then. Well, I mean, anyway, back to what appear to be the Trump administration's demands from Iran if they want the hostilities to cease. Number 12, the end of sanctions imposed by the international community. Number 13, U.S. assistance to advance its civilian nuclear program. And number 14, a snapback mechanism allowing for the automatic reimposition of sanctions if Iran fails to comply would be removed. All right, so now, here's the deal. Iran apparently saw all of that and said, oh, no. No, we have demands for you. Regardless of all the damage you have done to our country, our demands are you must act like we defeated you. Yes, that is what must happen. I mean, that's what Iran basically said on their state-run TV this morning. And observers are sitting back going, now wait a minute. Yeah. Well, this is what Yasser Arafat always did. The Palestinian Liberation Organization, the PLO. Every time our brother Muslims would attack Israel would have to give up land. Why should this be any different? Well, daggone, man, because this is 2026 and we're tired of it. We're sick of it. We've had it up to here, and that's why you got Trump. Now, Mark Thiessen, the great Mark Thiessen, who is on Fox News on a regular basis. He was a speechwriter for George W. Bush back in the day. We're not going to hold that against him. Mark Thiessen is highlighting a CBS poll. Republicans want President Trump to end the Iranian regime. 80% of Republicans who were polled by CBS want a change of Iran's leaders to ones that are pro-U.S. 90% of Republicans polled by CBS want us to make sure Iran's people are safe and free. 71% of Republicans polled by CBS say it's unacceptable to end the conflict with the current regime in power. And 84% of Republicans polled by CBS approve of military action. So if you think Joe Kent can't read the room, it might have something to do with the fact that Joe Kent can't read the room. I'm just saying. I think you can agree with some folks on some things and disagree on other things. And I think the only thing some of us wish had happened with our hitting Iran was that it had been done earlier and harder. Other than that, we think President Trump's doing a great job. So Iranian state TV, again, said Iran told the U.S. through the mediators that they reject the 15-point plan of President Trump sent by Pakistan. And people out there on Twitter, on X, are just saying it'd be foolish to expect peace from these radical Islamists who dream of burying Jews in the Dead Sea. Yeah, that's just not... But again, Trump gets to say, well, look, we've been over backwards. We try to negotiate. We offer them a peace plan, and they would rather us continue bombing them and taking them out. So, okay. Be careful what you wish for. You know what I'm saying? All right, so the great Dave Ellswick scheduled to be with you tomorrow morning at 7:06. I'm looking forward to seeing you tomorrow at 4:06, God willing, with the Doc Washburn Show right here on Little Rock's premier talk radio station, 101.1 The Answer.